I encourage parents to engage their children in every single thing that they're doing, because learning takes place everywhere. The learning space is really important to children. You see, what has happened to children is that their typical school structure has gone completely. And so parents now have to recreate that structure for children, because structure is important for children's development and for children's organization. So it's important that in every home there is a learning space for children. Now, homes differ tremendously, and therefore learning spaces are going to differ tremendously. There are children who, at one end of the socioeconomic spectrum in Jamaica, they have their own rooms, they have their own desk, they have always had learning spaces. But other children have sometimes used learning spaces in communities, their homework centers. Those are not operating as they used to, and children are finding learning spaces in their homes. Now, in homes where there are a lot of people and where there's not that much space, it's very difficult to find a learning space. And sometimes we've seen children who have been finding learning spaces out under the tree or sitting in a corner of the yard, just trying to find a space that they can consider their learning space. First thing about a learning space, that it needs to be defined wherever it is. And you need to separate that space for learning from the space for play. Sometimes that separation is only removal of a bit of cardboard that you have used to remove distractions. Sometimes it's the same dining table, but you have to separate the learning aspect from the play aspect of it. This is why children, when they're at school, they have a desk and a chair, and their play is primarily outside on the playground. It is important for children to separate the time for focus and attention from the time for play activities out on the large play activities. This is not to say that learning activities shouldn't be fun. I'm talking about the space itself where learning takes place. If you do not have an adequate learning space, a dedicated learning space, you are less able to focus and to pay attention, so it takes longer to learn the material that you have to learn, and then children get frustrated, and frustration is a lot easier around this time because there is already frustration about the social aspects of not being with your peers. So focus and attention is one. Two, there are the social aspects of learning, because children don't learn individually, they learn socially in a classroom. So they're hearing what their friends are saying, they're picking up on their friends' reactions, they're learning from their friends. Now you are in your space on your own. If you have a connection to the internet, you are sometimes able to connect to your friends, but it's not quite the same social interaction. So we do not have the same social interaction around learning. It's amazing how much children learn from each other. They learn so many different social skills through cooperation. So the learning space has its focus impact, which means limited attention. And of course, if there are distractions in the home, and depending on the home that you're in, those distractions can be very minimal and they can be a huge amount. The space needs to be organized, and if it's well organized, it can increase the child's interest. So, for example, when you have the learning space, you should have a little container with pencils and crayons and the books on the side, and it increases interest. But let me tell you what probably increases interest more. It's the fact that parents have gone out of their way to help a child to create a learning space. That says to the child that my parent is really interested in my education. They have taken all this time to help me set up this space. So together, that improves and increases the interest in children's learning. Participation and attendance in school is really dependent on a couple of things. Access. All right, so If we don't have access, then we have children who are not participating or attending. But I want to encourage parents whose children do not have access to encourage them to use the materials that the Ministry of Education has provided, the print materials. And apart from that, though, there's a lot of learning that can take place in homes. So engage your children with everything that you are doing. You can be doing math through measuring when cooking. You can be doing science by reaping the crops and planting the crops. So I encourage parents to engage their children in every single thing that they're doing, because learning takes place everywhere. Just like any other child, students with disabilities will benefit from the structure and the organization. Now, children with disabilities, you may have to make some adjustments for them. For example, a child who has visual impairment, you might want to adjust the lighting and make sure the lighting is better. A child who has hearing impairment, you want to be even more careful about distractions in the home, noise distractions. So you might want to make some adjustments. But to be fair, you still have to consider noise and lighting for children without disabilities. But there are some children that you're going to have to do some additional adjustments to the learning space for.
In the post-pandemic era, how can a dedicated learning space be used?
Well, I hope that parents will have, because they've had to have so much learning going on at home, that it might have taught parents how important it is to set up this special space for your children. One, because we know that it will improve their interest and their outcomes. And we hope that parents will also have learned how much more interested the children are in their learning when parents are more engaged. And that's probably one of the positive things that has happened out of learning at home, is that parents are much more aware of what their children are learning, how focused they are, how they learn in a classroom. So despite the negatives of the learning from home, there are some positives. And we want parents to continue to be engaged like this and to continue to support children through ensuring that they have special learning spaces. It would be interesting to see some learning spaces, right? You should start a competition for parents to send the different types of learning spaces that they've had to create for their children.
So would you like to issue that as a challenge to our parents?
Absolutely.